Captain Marcus Chun had seen worse places to die, but the crystalline spires of Zirian Prime still made his stomach turn. The alien architecture twisted impossibly into the purple sky, defying every law of physics he'd learned at the Seoul Naval Academy. Behind him, the emergency shuttle hissed and sparked, its hull cracked from the rough landing that had saved their lives, but stranded them on this hostile world. Status report. He barked to his remaining crew, though he could see the answer written in their grim faces. 3 dead in the crash, 2 more critically wounded. Of the 12-person diplomatic escort that had departed Earth's moon base, only 7 remained functional. Communications are down, sir, reported Lieutenant Sarah Kim, her fingers dancing across a shattered control panel. The crash damaged our quantum transmitter. We're completely cut off from the fleet. Marcus nodded grimly. They'd been en route to establish first contact with the Zirian Empire when a mysterious energy surge had crippled their main vessel. The diplomatic ship Harmony had managed to launch only 1 escape pod before being consumed by whatever weapon had struck them. Now, they were alone on an alien world, responsible for protecting the most important diplomatic mission in human history. In the shuttle's medical bay, Ambassador Elena Vasquez tended to their most precious cargo. Queen Silthary of Zirian lay unconscious on an emergency stretcher, her silver skin pale, and her breathing labored. The alien monarch's capture by rebels had sparked this entire crisis. Earth's government had risked everything to rescue her, hoping to forge an alliance with a powerful Zirian empire. How is she? Marcus asked quietly. Stable, but barely, Elena replied, checking the alien medical readings they'd barely learned to interpret. The rebels used some kind of neural disruptor on her. Her brain patterns are chaotic. Without proper Zirian medical facilities, she didn't need to finish. They all understood the implications. If Queen Silthary died under human protection, it would mean war between Earth and the Zirian Empire. Humanity's fragile position in galactic politics would crumble overnight. A low rumble echoed through the shuttle, followed by the distinctive whine of approaching aircraft. Marcus rushed to the viewport and cursed under his breath. 3 sleek vessels approached from the east, their organic curves and pulsing blue lights marking them as Zirian rebel craft. They found us, he announced. Everyone to defensive positions. The crew scrambled to ready their weapons, though Marcus knew they were hopelessly outmatched. Human plasma rifles against alien technology was like bringing knives to a nuclear war. But they had sworn an oath to protect the diplomatic mission, and humans had a reputation for keeping their promises, no matter the cost. The rebel ships landed in a triangular formation around the shuttle, disgorging dozens of armed figures. Marcus studied them through the viewport, noting their aggressive posture and the cruel modifications to their natural Zirian features. These weren't regular military forces, but extremist factions opposed to any alliance with humanity. An amplified voice echoed across the landing zone, the alien words translated by their universal communicator. Surrender the false queen, and the human diplomats will be granted swift deaths. Resist, and we will demonstrate why the galaxy fears Zirian justice. Marcus turned to his crew, seeing determination mixed with fear in their faces. These are good people, volunteers who had signed up to explore the stars and make peaceful contact with alien civilizations. None of them had expected to make their last stand on a hostile world, protecting an alien queen from her own people. Sir, Lieutenant Kim spoke up, her voice steady despite the circumstances. The shuttle's defensive shields can hold for maybe 10 minutes under concentrated fire. After that, we make them earn every inch, Marcus replied. He activated the shuttle's external communication system. This is Captain Marcus Chun of the United Earth Diplomatic Corps. Queen Silthary is under our protection and will remain so. If you wish to take her, you'll have to go through us. The response was immediate and devastating. Energy beams lanced out from the rebel positions, striking the shuttle's shields in cascades of brilliant light. The small craft shuddered under the assault, its defensive systems straining against technology far beyond human understanding. Inside the medical bay, Queen Silthary's eyes fluttered open. Despite her injuries, she struggled to sit up, her large violet eyes focusing on Ambassador Vasquez with evident confusion. Where am I?" she whispered in accented English. having learned the human language during preliminary negotiations. "You're safe, Your Majesty," Elena replied, gently pressing her back down. "You're aboard a human vessel. We rescued you from the rebels." The Queen's eyes widened as the implications sank in. "You came for me? But why would humans risk themselves for a Xerian ruler? Our people barely know each other." Before Elena could answer, another volley of energy blasts rocked the shuttle. Emergency lights flickered on as the main power grid fluctuated under the assault. Queen Silthry's expression shifted from confusion to understanding as she heard the distinctive sound of Xerian weapons firing. "The rebels," she breathed. "They followed you here." "Yes, Your Majesty. But don't worry. Our captain and crew will protect you." The Queen studied Elena's face intently, searching for deception and finding none. "Your people would truly die for someone they barely know? For a ruler of an alien empire? That's what humans do," Elena said simply. "When we give our word, we keep it. When we accept a responsibility, we see it through. Your safety is our mission, and we don't abandon our missions." Another massive impact nearly threw them both to the floor. Through the medical bay's small viewport, Queen Silthry could see human soldiers taking defensive positions around the shuttle, their primitive weapons ready to face impossible odds. In the command section, Marcus coordinated their desperate defense. The shields were down to 30% and falling fast. The rebels had begun advancing on foot, using portable energy weapons to suppress the human positions. "Sir," Sergeant Torres called out from his position near the cargo bay, "they're trying to breach the rear hatch." Marcus grabbed his rifle and moved to support the position. As he ran through the corridor, he caught sight of Queen Silthry watching him through the medical bay window. Their eyes met for a moment, and he saw something change in her expression. The look of resigned acceptance gave way to something else entirely. The first breach came at the shuttle's weak point, a service hatch damaged in the crash. Rebel soldiers poured through, their energy weapons casting eerie shadows in the cramped space. Marcus and his crew met them with concentrated fire, their training and determination making up for their technological disadvantage. The battle was fierce but brief. Human reflexes and tactics, honed by centuries of warfare, proved effective even against superior alien weapons. But Marcus knew this was only the beginning. More rebels waited outside, and their ammunition wouldn't last forever. The second wave hit harder than the first. Marcus crouched behind an overturned equipment crate, watching his ammunition counter-drop with each burst of covering fire. The rebels had learned from their initial assault, coordinating their attack patterns and using their superior numbers to overwhelming effect. "Torres, fall back to checkpoint 2, he shouted over the cacophony of energy weapons. The sergeant acknowledged with a sharp nod, dragging a wounded crewman with him as he retreated deeper into the shuttle. Queen Silthry had insisted on leaving the medical bay despite Ambassador Vasquez's protests. Now she sat in the shuttle's central corridor, her back against the bulkhead, watching the human defenders with growing amazement. These aliens fought with a ferocity she had never witnessed, even among her own warrior caste. They showed no fear of death, only determination to complete their mission. "Ambassador," she called to Elena, who was treating wounded crew members with whatever medical supplies they could find. "Your people fight like the ancient legends speak of berserkers. Do all humans possess such courage?" Elena looked up from bandaging Lieutenant Kim's shoulder wound. "It's not courage, Your Majesty. It's duty. Captain Shun and his crew swore an oath to protect you. Breaking that oath would be unthinkable, even if it cost their lives. Especially then." The Queen pondered this as another explosion rocked the shuttle. Through gaps in the defensive positions, she could see rebel soldiers advancing methodically, using portable shield generators to protect themselves from human weapons fire. Her own people, twisted by extremist ideology, showed none of the honor that had once defined Xerian military doctrine. Marcus fell back to the central corridor as the outer defenses collapsed. His remaining crew clustered around him, their faces grim but determined. 5 humans against 40 rebels, with nowhere left to retreat. "Sir," Lieutenant Kim said quietly, "we've got maybe 5 minutes of ammunition left. After that, we improvise," Marcus replied. He turned to Queen Silthry, noting how she had insisted on staying with them rather than hiding in the most protected part of the shuttle. Your Majesty, is there anything about rebel tactics we should know? Any weakness we can exploit? The Queen's violet eyes flashed with sudden inspiration. The neural disruptors they used on me, she said urgently. They're short-range devices designed to incapacitate rather than kill. If they're trying to take me alive, they can't risk using their heavy weapons while we're close to you. Marcus finished, understanding immediately. But that still doesn't solve our ammunition problem. Perhaps it does, Queen Silthery said, rising to her feet despite the danger. Captain, would you trust me with your life? Marcus studied her face, seeing something that reminded him of his own commanders during desperate situations. Leadership wasn't about species or technology. It was about making impossible decisions when everything was at stake. I already have, Your Majesty. The Queen smiled, the first genuine expression of joy Marcus had seen from her. Then follow my lead. What happened next would be debated in military academies across human space for decades. Queen Silthery stepped into the shuttle's main airlock, her hands raised in apparent surrender, while Marcus and his crew took positions in the shadows behind her. I am Queen Silthery of the Third Dynasty, she announced in her native language, her voice carrying the authority of centuries of royal breeding. You dare attack those under royal protection? The rebel advance halted immediately. Even extremists couldn't ignore millennia of genetic conditioning that made them pause when addressed by legitimate royalty. Their leader, a scarred Xerian with cruel modifications to his natural features, stepped forward. You are no queen, he snarled. You sold our empire's honor to these primitive aliens. You deserve no royal consideration. And yet you hesitate, Queen Silthery observed calmly. You know the ancient laws. These humans fought to protect me when my own people abandoned me. By the code of sanctuary, they are now under royal protection. Primitive superstition, the rebel leader spat, but Marcus noticed that several of his followers looked uncertain. We follow the new ways, not the weakness of ancient tradition. Then, you are no longer Xerian, the Queen declared, her voice ringing with absolute authority. You are merely criminals wearing stolen faces. The psychological effect was immediate and devastating. Half the rebel force began to waver, their weapons lowering slightly as generations of cultural programming warred with extremist indoctrination. In that moment of confusion, Marcus struck. Human reflexes, evolved in a high-gravity world with dangerous predators, proved their worth. Marcus and his crew burst from concealment with surgical precision, their remaining ammunition used with devastating efficiency. The rebels, caught between psychological crisis and physical assault, broke ranks entirely. But the victory was temporary. More rebel ships were approaching from the horizon, and this time they wouldn't be caught off guard by psychological warfare. The surviving rebels from the first attack retreated to a safe distance, calling for reinforcements while maintaining a loose perimeter around the shuttle. Your gambit bought us time, Marcus told the Queen as they regrouped inside the damaged shuttle. But they'll be back with enough firepower to level this entire area. Queen Silthery nodded grimly. The Code of Sanctuary was a desperate measure. It may not work twice. Ambassador Vasquez looked up from her damaged communications equipment. I'm detecting energy signatures from orbit. Multiple ships, but I can't identify them as friend or foe. Marcus studied the tactical display, noting the approaching vessel's formation patterns. Military precision, but who's military? The rebels could have called for orbital support, or perhaps, Your Majesty, he said carefully, how quickly could loyal Xerian forces respond to a distress signal? The Queen's eyes widened with hope and fear in equal measure. If my personal guard received word of my location, perhaps hours. But these rebels have been planning this operation for months. They would have taken steps to prevent outside interference. The sound of approaching engines filled the air once again, but this time from multiple directions. Marcus counted at least a dozen contacts converging on their position. Either rescue was arriving, or they were about to face overwhelming odds in their final battle. Through the shuttle's main viewport, he saw the rebel leader pointing in their direction, clearly coordinating with the new arrivals. But something was wrong with the tactical situation. The incoming ships were maintaining formation patterns that suggested military discipline, not rebel coordination. Ambassador, Marcus called to Vasquez, are you getting any communication attempts? Friend or foe signals? Anything? Nothing clear, but she paused, her face lighting up with sudden hope. Captain, I'm detecting quantum signatures consistent with Xerian Imperial Navy protocols. The encryption patterns match what we learned during diplomatic preparation. Queen Silthery pressed against the viewport, studying the approaching ships with expert eyes, trained from birth to recognize military formations. The crimson banners, she whispered, her voice filled with relief. Those are Imperial Guard vessels. My personal protection force. Marcus felt a weight lift from his shoulders, but his military training kept him cautious. How can we be certain? Could the rebels have captured Imperial ships? Impossible, the Queen replied firmly. The Imperial Guard are chosen from birth and conditioned through genetic modification. They literally cannot betray their sworn loyalty. If those ships carry my guard, then rescue has arrived. The rebel leader seemed to reach the same conclusion. His forces began withdrawing hastily toward their own vessels, abandoning their siege in favor of escape. But the Imperial ships moved with predatory grace, cutting off retreat routes with practiced efficiency. What followed was less a battle than an execution. Imperial energy weapons, far superior to anything the rebels possessed, carved through their stolen ships like paper. Within minutes, the threat that had nearly overwhelmed Marcus and his crew was reduced to smoking wreckage scattered across the crystalline landscape. A single Imperial shuttle descended from the command ship, landing with ceremonial precision near the damaged human vessel. Marcus watched through the viewport as figures in elaborate armor emerged, their movements formal and ritualistic. The Imperial Guard who entered the human shuttle moved with fluid precision that spoke of centuries of training. Their armor gleamed with embedded crystals that pulsed in rhythm with their heartbeats, and their faces bore the distinctive markings of the Royal Protection caste. Marcus had read about them in diplomatic briefings, but seeing them in person was altogether different. Their commander, a tall Xerian whose armor bore additional ceremonial inscriptions, approached Queen Silthery with movements that could only be described as reverent. He dropped to one knee in a gesture that seemed to encompass both military respect and religious devotion. "My queen," he said in accented English, clearly making an effort to include the humans in the conversation. "We received fragmentary distress signals from your location. The entire Imperial Navy has been searching for you since your disappearance." Queen Silthery placed a hand on the guard's shoulder, a gesture that seemed to convey more than mere acknowledgement. "Rise, Commander Vexel. You arrive at a most opportune moment." She turned toward Marcus and his crew, who stood at attention despite their battered condition. "But you are not the ones who saved me." Commander Vexel's eyes shifted to the humans, taking in their improvised defenses, depleted ammunition supplies, and obvious signs of desperate combat. His expression changed subtly, professional assessment replacing formal protocol. "These humans fought to protect you?" he asked, his tone carrying surprise that he couldn't quite conceal. "For hours," the Queen replied firmly. "Against impossible odds, with primitive weapons, facing certain death. They never wavered, never considered surrender, never suggested abandoning their mission." Her voice carried a weight of amazement that made the Imperial Guards exchange meaningful glances. Marcus stepped forward, offering a crisp military salute that he hoped would translate across species. "Captain Marcus Chun, United Earth Diplomatic Corps. Our mission was to establish peaceful contact and ensure Her Majesty's safety. We consider that mission ongoing until she's returned to her people." Commander Vexel studied Marcus with new interest. In Xerian culture, personal combat prowess was deeply respected, but the idea of aliens fighting to protect their queen challenged fundamental assumptions about human nature. "Captain Chun," he said formally, "the Imperial Navy owes you a debt that cannot easily be repaid. By your actions, you have prevented a catastrophe that would have destabilized our entire empire." Ambassador Vasquez moved to join the diplomatic exchange, her training taking over despite the extraordinary circumstances. "Commander, our governments had arranged for peaceful negotiations regarding mutual defense treaties. We hope this incident won't jeopardize those discussions." The commander's response was interrupted by urgent communications from his ship. He listened to his earpiece for several moments, his expression growing increasingly grave. "My queen," he said finally, "the situation is more complex than we initially understood. The rebels who captured you were part of a larger conspiracy. While we search for you, they launched coordinated attacks on 3 Imperial outposts. Our intelligence suggests they have significant backing from external sources. Queen Silthary's face hardened with royal determination. External sources? You mean enemy species? The evidence points to hegemony involvement. Commander Vexel replied grimly. Marcus felt a chill run down his spine. The hegemony was humanity's greatest fear in galactic politics. A coalition of aggressive species that viewed younger civilizations as either resources to exploit or threats to eliminate. If they were backing Xerian rebels, it meant the situation had implications far beyond a simple internal conflict. They're trying to destabilize the Empire before our alliance with Earth can be formalized, Queen Silthary realized. If my death could be blamed on human incompetence, it would provide justification for both internal revolution and external invasion, the commander finished. The rebels weren't just trying to remove you from power. They were creating a pretext for war. The implications hung heavy in the shuttle's cramped confines. Marcus understood military strategy well enough to see the elegant brutality of the plan. Assassinate the Queen while she was under human protection. Blame Earth for the failure. Use the resulting chaos to justify hegemony intervention. Humanity would face war on multiple fronts before they had time to establish meaningful alliances. Commander, Marcus said carefully, what's the current status of the Imperial government? Are there other members of the royal family who could maintain stability? Vexel's expression grew even more somber. Her Majesty is the last of the direct royal line. The succession laws require unanimous consent from the Imperial Council to crown a new dynasty, and the rebels have supporters within the government. Without Queen Silthary's leadership, civil war, the Queen concluded quietly, which is exactly what the hegemony wants. Lieutenant Kim, who had been monitoring their communications equipment, looked up with sudden urgency. Captain, I'm detecting massive energy signatures approaching from deep space. Multiple fleets moving at high speed towards Xerian space. Commander Vexel activated his own communications gear, his face pale as reports streamed in from Imperial Navy sensors. Confirmed. Hegemony battle fleets, at least 50 capital ships, will reach our borders within standard hours. They're not even trying to hide their approach. Queen Silthary closed her eyes for a moment, and Marcus could see her processing the terrible mathematics of interstellar warfare. They're confident the Empire will be too destabilized to mount effective resistance. The rebellion was just the opening move. Your Majesty, Marcus said, an idea forming in his mind. What if the rebellion failed completely? What if instead of appearing weak and divided, the Empire demonstrated its strength through alliance with humanity? The Queen opened her eyes, studying Marcus with new attention. Explain. The rebels expected to kill you and blame us. Instead, you're alive, and we fought to protect you. That changes everything. Instead of a failed diplomatic mission, this becomes proof that humans can be trusted as allies. Ambassador Vasquez caught onto his reasoning immediately. The hegemony was counting on political chaos to justify their invasion. But if the Empire appears strong and unified with new human allies, they would have to reconsider their strategy, Commander Vexel finished, his expression showing growing hope. But the Imperial Council would need to act quickly to formalize any alliance. The traditional approval process takes months. Queen Silthary stood up straighter, and Marcus could see the royal bearing that had made her a powerful leader returning despite her injuries. Then we bypass tradition. Emergency powers exist for exactly these circumstances. My queen, the commander said carefully, using emergency powers to formalize an alien alliance would be unprecedented. The political repercussions will be irrelevant if the Empire falls to hegemony invasion, she replied sharply. Commander, prepare immediate transport to the Imperial capital, and send word to all loyal fleet commanders. Emergency mobilization, full battle readiness. She turned to Marcus and his crew, her violet eyes intense with purpose. Captain Chun, I'm formally requesting that you and your diplomatic mission accompany me to the Imperial capital. What happens in the next few hours will determine the fate of both our civilizations. Marcus exchanged glances with Ambassador Vasquez, seeing his own thoughts reflected in her expression. They had come to negotiate a simple trade agreement, and found themselves at the center of interstellar conflict. But that was exactly the kind of impossible situation the humans seemed to specialize in handling. "It would be our honor, Your Majesty." The transfer to the Imperial Guard ship proceeded with military efficiency, but Marcus noticed how Queen Silthry insisted that his entire crew be treated with the same ceremonial respect accorded to high-ranking Xerian officers. Word was already spreading through the Imperial Navy about the human defense of their queen, and Marcus could see the ripple effects in how they were regarded. As the Imperial ship lifted off from the crystalline surface of Xerian Prime, Marcus watched the wreckage of the rebel forces disappear below them. The immediate threat was over, but the larger crisis was just beginning. Somewhere in deep space, hegemony fleets were approaching with the confidence of predators who believed their prey was already wounded and helpless. They were about to discover that humans had a talent for turning desperate situations into unexpected victories. The imperial capital of Xerios stretched across an entire continent, its spiral towers reaching toward twin moons that cast ethereal light across crystalline spires. Marcus stood at the observation deck of the Imperial Guard vessel, watching the ancient city grow larger as they descended. Beside him, Queen Silthry pointed out landmarks with the pride of someone who had grown up viewing this vista as the center of known civilization. "The council chamber," she indicated, gesturing toward a massive dome that seemed to pulse with its own inner light. Built over 3,000 years ago, it has hosted deliberations that shaped galactic politics since before your species discovered agriculture. Marcus nodded respectfully, though his mind was occupied with more immediate concerns. Ambassador Vasquez was in the ship's communication center, coordinating with Earth's diplomatic corps and preparing for negotiations that would have to be completed in hours rather than the months originally planned. "Your Majesty," he said carefully, "our intelligence suggests the hegemony has been planning this operation for years. They'll have contingencies we haven't considered." Queen Silthry's expression grew thoughtful. "You're thinking like a military officer, Captain. That's exactly the perspective we need." She paused, studying his face. "Tell me, in human military doctrine, how do you respond when facing a coordinated attack by superior forces?" "Change the rules of engagement," Marcus replied immediately. "Make them fight on terms that negate their advantages." "Precisely. The hegemony expects to face a divided empire weakened by internal conflict. Instead, they'll encounter something they've never seen before, a human-Xerian alliance forged in battle." The ship settled onto a landing platform that buzzed with activity. Imperial guards in ceremonial armor formed honor corridors while government officials hurried between buildings carrying urgent dispatches. The air itself seemed to vibrate with tension as news of the approaching hegemony fleets spread throughout the capital. Commander Vexel appeared at Marcus's shoulder, his expression grim. "My queen, the Imperial Council has been in emergency session since word of your rescue arrived. They are divided on how to proceed." "Divided how?" Queen Silthry asked sharply. "Some council members question whether formalizing an alliance with humanity might be seen as a sign of weakness. They argue that accepting alien assistance implies we cannot defend ourselves." Marcus bit back his first response, which would have involved several colorful observations about political timing. Instead, he said diplomatically, "Commander, in human experience, strength comes from choosing reliable allies before you need them, not after." As they disembarked, Marcus was struck by the alien architecture's organic beauty. The buildings seemed grown rather than constructed, their surfaces covered in patterns that shifted subtly in the changing light. But what impressed him most were the crowds of Xerian citizens gathering in the great plazas, their faces turned toward the sky where the distant dots of approaching warships could be seen even in daylight. "They know," Queen Silthry observed, following his gaze. "Word travels quickly when fleets move in formation. My people understand what those ships represent." Ambassador Vasquez joined them as they entered the Imperial Palace, her expression mixing exhaustion with determination. "Captain, I've been in contact with Admiral Harrison. The Earth fleet is mobilizing, but our nearest vessels are at least 4 days away. The hegemony will be here in 6 hours. Commander Vexel added grimly. Queen Silthry stopped walking, turning to face both humans with an expression of absolute resolve. "Then, we have 6 hours to change the balance of power in this sector of the galaxy." The Imperial Council chamber was even more impressive from the inside. Hundreds of Xerian representatives sat in concentric circles around a central dais, their voices creating a constant murmur of debate that echoed from crystal walls. As Queen Silthry entered, the noise died instantly, replaced by respectful silence that seemed to stretch on forever. Marcus and Ambassador Vasquez took positions slightly behind the Queen, acutely aware that they were the first humans ever to witness an Imperial Council session. The weight of history pressed down on them as Queen Silthry approached the central podium. "Honored counselors," she began, her voice carrying clearly throughout the vast chamber. "We face the gravest crisis in our empire's history, but we also face the greatest opportunity." An elderly Xerian rose from the front row, his elaborate robes marking him as a senior council member. "Your Majesty, we rejoice in your safe return. But reports of your rescue by alien forces have raised concerns about the Empire's military capabilities." Marcus felt tension ripple through the chamber. This was exactly the political trap Queen Silthry had predicted. The rescue that saved her life could be twisted into evidence of Xerian weakness. "Counselor Thex," the Queen replied calmly, "perhaps you would like to hear the details of my rescue directly from those who accomplished it." She gestured toward Marcus, who stepped forward with military bearing despite feeling completely out of his depth. Addressing an alien governing body while enemy fleets approached was not covered in any training manual he'd ever read. "Honored counselors," he began, hoping his translator was working correctly. "My crew and I were part of a diplomatic mission intended to establish peaceful cooperation between our civilizations. When we learned of Her Majesty's capture, our governments authorized a rescue operation." "With how many ships?" Counselor Thex interrupted sharply. "How many soldiers?" "One small diplomatic vessel," Marcus replied truthfully. 12 crew members, 7 of whom survived the crash on Xerian Prime. The silence that followed was absolute. Marcus could see council members exchanging glances of disbelief as the implication sank in. 7 humans, another counselor called out. "Held off how many rebels?" "Approximately 40, sir, with air support. We maintained defensive positions for several hours until Imperial Guard forces arrived." Queen Silthry seized the moment perfectly. "These humans fought to protect me, not because they were ordered to, not because they feared consequences, but because they had given their word. When offered surrender terms that would have spared their lives, they refused. When facing certain death, they stood firm." Counselor Thex looked troubled. "Your Majesty, while we appreciate their dedication, the fact remains that our queen required rescue by aliens. How does this strengthen our position?" "Because," Queen Silthry replied, her voice rising with passion, "it demonstrates that humans can be trusted absolutely with our most precious responsibilities. Because it proves that they possess warrior virtues our own rebels have abandoned. And because," she paused for dramatic effect, "because it means the hegemony's carefully planned invasion is based on completely incorrect assumptions." Ambassador Vasquez stepped forward, her diplomatic training taking over. "Honored counselors, the hegemony believes they will face a weakened empire torn by civil war. Instead, they will encounter a strengthened empire backed by human military innovation and determination." "And what exactly can human military forces contribute against hegemony battle fleets?" Counselor Thex asked skeptically. Marcus smiled grimly. "Sir, humans have a saying, it's not the size of the dog in the fight, it's the size of the fight in the dog. Our ships may be smaller, our weapons less advanced, but we've been studying hegemony tactics for decades. We know their weaknesses. More importantly," Queen Silthry added, "we know they don't expect to face human tactical innovation combined with Xerian military technology. The alliance they hope to prevent is the very weapon we'll use to defeat them." The debate that followed was intense, but brief. Reports continued streaming in of hegemony fleet movements, and even the most conservative council members could see the mathematics of the situation. The Empire could face invasion alone and likely fall, or accept human alliance and have a fighting chance. When a final vote was called, it was overwhelmingly in favor of immediate alliance formalization. As ancient ceremonial protocols were compressed into minutes instead of months, Marcus found himself witnessing history being made at breakneck speed. But Even as the alliance papers were signed amid cheers from the council chamber, he knew the real test was still coming. In less than 4 hours, the largest hegemony fleet ever assembled would arrive, expecting easy conquest. Instead, they would find something that had never existed before in galactic history, a human-Xerian alliance forged in battle and tempered by mutual respect. The question was whether it would be enough. The combined fleet command center hummed with unprecedented activity as human and Xerian officers worked side by side, their different technologies and tactical doctrines merging into something entirely new. Marcus stood at a holographic display showing the approaching hegemony armada, counting vessels that represented the combined military might of 6 aggressive species. 73 capital ships. Admiral Harrison's voice crackled over the quantum communicator from the hastily arrived human task force. The largest hegemony fleet movement in recorded history. They're not taking any chances. Queen Silthary studied the tactical display with expert eyes, trained in military strategy since childhood. They're using standard hegemony doctrine, overwhelming force concentrated in a single thrust. It served them well against divided enemies. But not against coordinated allies, Marcus observed. Admiral, what's our combined strength? 28 Xerian Imperial Navy vessels, plus 12 human ships that made emergency jumps to get here in time, Admiral Harrison replied. On paper, we're outgunned 3-1. Ambassador Vasquez looked up from her communication station where she'd been coordinating with both Earth and Xerian command structures. Admiral, the political situation is stabilizing rapidly. Word of the alliance is spreading throughout both civilizations. Public support is overwhelming. Marcus nodded grimly. Popular support was crucial for long-term success, but it wouldn't help them in the next few hours when energy beams started flying. He turned his attention back to the tactical situation, noting how Xerian and human officers were adapting to each other's approaches with remarkable speed. Commander Vexel, he called to the Imperial Guard officer who had become their liaison. Your sensor technology is more advanced than ours, but our targeting computers process multiple variables faster. What if we linked the systems? Theoretically possible, Vexel replied thoughtfully. Human battle computers could direct Xerian energy weapons with unprecedented precision. But the integration would require real-time cooperation between crews, which is exactly what the hegemony won't expect, Queen Silthary finished. Captain Chun, your tactical assessment. Marcus studied the approaching fleet formation, noting patterns that suggested overconfidence. They're maintaining ceremonial attack formation, impressive to look at, but it prioritizes intimidation over tactical flexibility. If we could force them to break formation, the linked targeting systems could create crossfire patterns they've never encountered before, Admiral Harrison added over the communicator. But we need to get their attention first. Make them react instead of following their predetermined plan. Queen Silthary smiled with predatory anticipation. Leave that to me. What followed was the most frantic hour of technical integration in military history. Human engineers worked alongside Xerian technicians, linking computers that had been designed by different species based on entirely different principles. The hybrid systems that emerged were crude, but functional, creating tactical capabilities that neither civilization could achieve alone. Marcus found himself on the bridge of the Imperial flagship Eternal Honor, watching Queen Silthary coordinate her forces with the confidence of someone born to command. She had insisted on personally leading the defense, a decision that electrified both human and Xerian crews. Hegemony fleet entering outer sensor perimeter. Lieutenant Kim reported from her position at the hybrid tactical station. They're broadcasting standard surrender demands. The hegemony message, when it came, was exactly what Marcus had expected, arrogant demands for immediate capitulation backed by threats of total destruction. But Queen Silthary's response was something no hegemony commander had ever heard before. This is Queen Silthary of the Xerian Empire, speaking for the newly formed Xerian-Human Alliance. Your invasion fleet is not welcome in our space. Withdraw immediately or face the consequences. The silence that followed lasted nearly a minute as the hegemony commanders processed this unexpected development. When their response came, it carried undertones of uncertainty that hadn't been there before. Unknown alien influence detected in Xerian communications. Hegemony forces will proceed with liberation operations as planned. They're trying to convince themselves this doesn't change anything, Admiral Harrison observed. But look at their formation. They're already starting to adjust for unknown variables. Marcus watched the tactical display as the hegemony fleet began subtle modifications to their approach vector. They were still coming, but the predatory confidence of their initial advance had been replaced by cautious professionalism. All ships, Queen Silthry announced over the fleet-wide channel, commence Operation Human Spirit. The name had been Marcus's suggestion, though he wasn't entirely sure Queen Silthry understood the cultural implications. In human military tradition, operations named for abstract concepts usually involve desperate tactics and impossible odds, exactly the kind of situation humans specialized in turning to their advantage. The combined fleet moved with choreographed precision toward the approaching hegemony armada. Xerian ships, with their elegant curved hulls and crystalline energy projectors, sailed alongside human vessels that looked like mechanical predators built for war. The visual contrast was striking, but the tactical coordination was flawless. Contact in 30 seconds, Commander Vexel announced. All hybrid targeting systems online. Marcus held his breath as the first exchange of fire lit up the darkness between the stars. Hegemony energy beams lanced out with devastating power, but they struck empty space where the combined fleet had been moments before. Human tactical computers had predicted the firing patterns and directed evasive maneuvers that seemed to defy physics. The return volley was unlike anything in recorded military history. Xerian weapons fired with accuracy, guided by human targeting systems, creating intersecting fields of energy that caught hegemony ships in crossfire patterns they couldn't escape. 3 enemy vessels exploded in the first exchange, their shields overwhelmed by precisely coordinated attacks. Impossible, came a transmission from the hegemony fleet as their formation began to scatter. How are they anticipating our targeting solutions? Queen Silthry's response was broadcast on all frequencies, ensuring that every ship in both fleets could hear her words. Because humans taught us that true strength comes from unity, and we taught them that honor demands protecting those who cannot protect themselves. Together, we are something you have never faced before. The battle that followed would be studied in military academies for centuries. Human tactical innovation combined with Xerian technological superiority created a fighting force that operated according to principles the hegemony couldn't understand or counter. Ships that should have been outgunned and overwhelmed instead danced through space with lethal grace, their crews working together as if they'd trained together for years instead of hours. Marcus watched from the flagship's bridge as the tide of battle turned decisively in their favor. Hegemony ships, designed for crushing weaker opponents through superior firepower, found themselves facing enemies who refused to be intimidated and couldn't be outmaneuvered. Their command ship is requesting parley, Lieutenant Kim reported with barely concealed amazement. Queen Silthry looked to Marcus, seeking the human perspective on an unprecedented situation. No hegemony fleet had ever requested negotiations from a position of weakness. In human tradition, Marcus said carefully, when an aggressor asks for parley after attacking without provocation, we listen to what they have to say. But we don't forget what they attempted to do. The parley, when it came, was brief and to the point. The hegemony commander, clearly shaken by the total failure of their invasion plan, offered to withdraw in exchange for safe passage. But Queen Silthry had other ideas. You came to conquer an empire you believed was weak and divided, she told the hegemony commander over the communication channel. Instead, you discovered an alliance that will stand against aggression wherever it appears in the galaxy. Withdraw your fleets and inform your leadership that the balance of power in this sector has changed permanently. As the battered hegemony fleet limped away into deep space, Marcus realized that everything had changed. The alliance born from a desperate rescue mission had proven itself in the crucible of battle. Humanity now had powerful allies among the stars, and the Xerian Empire had learned that strength could come from friendship as well as conquest. Queen Silthry found Marcus in the observation lounge hours after the battle, staring out at the stars where the debris of hegemony ships still glittered in the light of distant suns. "Captain," she said quietly, "when this crisis began, I thought I was facing the end of my empire. Instead, I discovered something I never expected to find: allies who would risk everything for beings they barely knew. Marcus turned to face her, seeing not just an alien queen, but someone who had become a trusted comrade through shared danger. Your Majesty, humans have a saying, we judge others not by their words, but by their actions under pressure. By that measure, the Xerian Empire has proven itself worthy of our highest respect. Queen Silthry smiled, and when she spoke again, her words would be remembered in both human and Xerian history. Then, let it be recorded that on this day, two civilizations became one people. Captain Marcus Chun and his crew protected our royal family when our own people could not. For this, and for the courage they showed in our darkest hour, they are claimed as our own. They are Xerian now, and Xerian protects its own. The ceremony that followed was broadcast throughout both civilizations, showing a human captain receiving honors that had never been granted to an alien before. But for Marcus, the real reward was knowing that humanity now had allies among the stars, and that sometimes the most important battles were won not through superior firepower, but through the simple act of keeping one's word when everything was at stake.